All good. Hey guys, welcome to Jerry's Live. As always, I'm your host, Amy Gardner-Dean, and today we're doing red, white, and blue because it's a little belated for the holiday, but I know some people are still off on their holiday weekends and, you know, patriotism and all that exciting stuff. So J159 is the show, 159th episode today. It is termed all about red, white, and blue, the 4th of July inspired special. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about red, white, and blue pigments. Now, obviously, there's so many of them. We are not going to be covering every single red, white, or blue pigment that's out there. What I did instead was took all of the red, white, and blue of the LUKAS 1862 paints in oils. So just to kind of like cut it down a little bit because there's a lot. And we'll talk about too, though, about these particular pigments that are in these colors and maybe how the light fastness ratings translate differently in watercolor or, you know, acrylic, things like that. So it's really a pigment episode, but we're just using a brand of paint to kind of talk about those pigments. Again, not all of those colors that exist out there, but it's a pretty good sampling. And what this is really designed to do, because I'm a little bit of a tech nut, and I really think that you should be too, if you're a painter, is trying to train you to look at your materials more carefully, even before purchase, because a lot of the problems that some painters can tend to have sometimes, especially with oils, can be a direct result of not knowing enough about your material. There are some colors based on their chemical composition that should not be used together that can cause some terrible, awful things. So, and with a couple of these colors, there will be something I'll say about that. So, so this is about kind of arming yourself with technical knowledge. So if you're one of the people that loves to tune in and we do demos, demos are really fun. This is the hard, not fun part of education. And it's just like in school, it's stuff you're gonna need to know down the road for yourself in your artistic life. So better to bite the bullet and have to suffer through Amy lecturing you about pigments, okay? So we are gonna go ahead and get started. If you are interested in any of these colors after the fact, or looking them up, so you can look at the tech notes on our website, you can put in the keyword JL159 on the jerrysartorama.com website. That will pull up all of the colors that I'm going to be using today. I did not add anything like brushes or any of those things. That's irrelevant and extraneous compared to what we're doing today. We're only focusing on those colors. So also, Art of the Carolinas, that opened this week, or this last week, I guess July 1st. We are still planning on doing it, and we'll be adhering to whatever the mandates are by the state at that point in November, with the big, exciting retail expo and with all of the classes for Art of the Carolinas. But it happens here in Raleigh. It is a 4-day extravaganza of fun for artists. So there's no other way. It's like Artist Christmas and learning and products and fun all rolled into one. So all those classes are up. You can already start registering now for them. And not the worst thing to do, because I know out of two of my 3 classes I already have sold several spots. So it's good to know. So, and if you're watching at home, just so you know, you will not be hearing Katie. Will is taking control today of the master board for filming. We've got Frida and Amanda, as usual, on their computers doing the chat and moderating for you guys. So let's get started. So a lot of information that's out there that anybody can access is at a website called artiscreation.com. What that website does is you can do it by color, or you can do it by natural pigment or pigment number, whichever way you do. I just am old school. I click on the color, then I go to the color number. It gives you an entire link of lists for the color number because the chart is long. You click on that, it immediately directs you down the list to wherever that pigment number is. And it's a great way for you to learn about it. It ranks everything like the color index and generic name for the paint, for the pigment, common, historical, and marketing names, and it does give brand abbreviations. So if it's a pigment that's called like LUKAS Red, what does that mean? That's LUKAS's trade name for that, but you'll be able to see within using the pigment that that color is made out of, there might be, you know, 50 other brand names that call it something different, that call it their own trade name. So you'll be able to see kind of, it starts kind of training you to look for what are just trade names instead of necessarily a paint that's called, like cobalt blue is obviously going to be cobalt blue. But something like LUKAS Red, could, what does that mean? Okay, so it's a way to start training yourself to kind of learn the difference, that there's brand names and that there are pigment names and what the difference is. It gives the chemical composition, the color description, and the long-term effects of light on that color. And it does talk about different mediums and that it can be different with different mediums. It also gives an opacity rating. On that website, they do theirs 1 to 4. 1 is opaque, 4 is transparent, 2 and 3, obviously, you can figure out amongst yourselves. And then it also gives a light fastness rating for that general pigment. Now, again, that can change depending on the medium, okay? Something I wanted to talk about that's very confusing. And to me, this doesn't make sense, and I wish there was a better way to do it because it seems kind of backwards. Organic pigments versus inorganic pigments. Organic to me seems like that would be natural, right? So that would be something that's mineral or vegetable or whatever. Not the case. So I'm going to break that down for you now, just so you know. Always think the opposite. Organic pigments are formed from carbon-based complex chemistry. They are synthetically manufactured. Okay? The thing that you need to know about the difference between organic and inorganic. Synthetically manufactured, I always feel like that's just like not as good of a thing because, you know, we're taught that nature is always best. With color, that's not always the case, folks. Things that you can expect from organic pigments are high chroma. That means the purity and the intensity of a color. It is going to be pow in your face if it's an organic pigment, for the most part, okay? High tinting strength. That means when you go to make that color lighter with white, you make it more pastel, you make it softer, you are going to have to use a lot more white for that color because it's a punch you in the face color, okay? Tendency towards transparency. That means that when you look at the color in mass tone, it's going to tend to, not always, but for the most part, you can bet on an organic pigment being more transparent. Think of something like phthalo, your phthalo blues, your phthalo greens, colors like that, okay? The nice thing about them, though, is that they tend to give you better mixes with more brilliance because since they're more transparent, it allows the light to really come down into those pigments that you're mixing and refract that color that much better. Okay? So, by the opposite, inorganic pigments sounds less natural, but they're not. Those are the ones based on natural minerals, ores, they're oxides, they're sulfides, they're the dioxides, like titanium, okay? They have a lower chroma, so the color intensity is not as strong. They have a lower tinting strength. You don't need to put you need to put more of them into a mix with white to keep the color stronger against the white. There's more opacity is what the tendency is. Zinc is the inorganic pigment that's kind of that natural exception. Although some zincs can, with heat, be made more opaque. Then you can use it in blends. When you want to make something more opaque, you can use those inorganic pigments to mix with other colors that are more transparent to help push the opacity. But just remember that the organic pigments that are more transparent, they tend to be cleaner, they have better brilliance in color. Anytime you start making things more opaque, There's not the pop. It's kind of a little softer, a little grayer looking, okay? It loses its pizzazz, we'll go with. I like that word, pizzazz. I feel like you're going to rob me with the mask on. It's just really weird to see you with the hat and mask, Will.
And all that was at artiscreation.com?
Artiscreation.com, yes. Mark it, keep it in your history, put it in your saved items so that you can come back to it easily, because I always forget the name and then I have to Google it, and then I'm like, why did I even forget that? So yes, so those are the things that we need to remember as we're working with pigments, okay? Now, the tube isn't going to say all those things. It's not going to be like, so hey, we're, inorganic, hey, we're synthetic, hey. What the tube is going to give you, it's going to give you whatever the number, the manufacturer, obviously, the brand, the color number that they refer to as a color number. Not everybody, it's just for that manufacturer. The name that they give it, whether it's the actual pigment or not. They'll put their light fastness ratings on it. Different manufacturers have different light fastness ratings as far as what kind of rule of thumb they follow, which to me can be frustrating and confusing. Some, not all of the European manufacturers, follow the blue wool scale, which really typically was used more for dyes and things like that, but just it's more old school, so they follow that. LUKAS does that too. So you've got, your higher pigment numbers that are, their light fastness being more like 7s and 8s, and then the lower they go, obviously, the less light fast they are. They also put stars on there, and then there's always that little box on some paints, right? That's either solid, or it's like white, or it's black, or it's like got the slash through it, where it's got white and black. That's going to be your opacity. So if you're just in a store and you're looking at paint and you're like, whoa, this has a slash through the middle and it's half light and half dark, that's going to mean, depending on that company's legend, because they're all different, that it's either semi-opaque or it's semi-transparent, okay? Then on the back, what you're going to want to look for are your pigment numbers. So on here, it says, it's got the name of the color in multiple languages, and then it says pigment PR108, okay? What does that mean? That's where Artist Creation comes in. It will tell you what that pigment is, and then you'll know how it works well. And why this is important is some colors are hot, some colors are cool. So you might have a red that tends to be more yellowy. You might have a red that tends to have a blue undertone. You need to know that for mixing, because if you want to take a red, just any random red, and make a nice violet, if it's got yellow undertones, guess what? It's going to stink trying to make a violet or a purple, okay? So that's why this kind of information is important before you go and actually purchase materials. Because if you're just purchasing willy-nilly based on what the random color swatch on your computer looks like, that mass tone may not give you really what the undertones are going to be. That's why it's important to research this. It's the non-fun part of creating art. So, all right, so let's start looking at some of these, and we'll talk about these colors as we go. And we've got a lot of them, so we're going to go fast. And I apologize, because we might not, I'm going to allow Will, even though he looks like he's going to rob me, to ask me questions as we go along. So just jump in, Will. If I take a breath, just go, hey! That's fine. But we want to go along quickly because you want to see all these colors and kind of what they look like in mass tone out of the tube. And we'll talk about it very quickly as we go. All right? Are we good so far?
So far. I'm going to learn a lot today.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I probably will cough because I've got allergies and they're bad right now. So, all right. So cadmium red deep. That's the PR108 that we're looking at. That's a cadmium red pigment. And I think I'm probably going to need reading glasses for that. Okay, cadmiums, because it's an inorganic pigment or what, they tend to be more opaque. So this is your friend when you're really trying to cover canvas, you know, or cover a ground. It's not your friend when you're trying to make really nice, light, soft mixes, excuse me, water, that have a lot of brilliance. All right, and by the way, it's Frida's birthday today, YouTube, so please wish her a happy birthday. All right, so cadmium red, this is an inorganic pigment, the P108. It is cadmium selenosulfite. What that means, you're really going to have to look at Artist Creation and go from there. Okay, good. All right, so this pigment specifically, and every manufacturer does different things with it, okay? They might heat it, they might make it way hotter than another manufacturer, which might make it deeper or lighter, depending. You can really see how opaque that is just with one swipe of that brush. They say it's semi-opaque. To me, that really counts as opaque. It's staining with a good tinting strength. That means if you're putting this on a canvas and trying to kind of scumble and use it lightly, it's going to stick and it's going to stay really well. So that's what staining is. Just think about if you've ever used phthalo blue and then gone, I didn't want that part phthalo, and you wipe it and can't get rid of it, and you need to use a more opaque color to kind of cover it up. That's what staining is. Good tint strength means when you mix it against white, it can hold its own pretty decently. It's a series 3. A lot of people ask what the difference is in that. So you've got, depending on the manufacturer, you can have anything from a series 1 to maybe a series 4. Some manufacturers might go as high as an 8 or 9. There's a few manufacturers that have crazy steps. What that is it depends on, the higher the series, the more money, obviously. Is it an easy pigment to get a hold of? A lot of these pigments came from the automotive industry, kind of more recently. Is it something that was bought in big batches? Is it easy to get a hold of? It's going to be cheaper that way. Is it something they can get easy from just a bank of a river somewhere? Or is this something that has to be mined, where they're actually strip mining or digging, or there's danger involved, right? Those are going to run those prices up higher. Is it something that needs a chemist? There has to be a lot of tweaking. There's a lot of other chemicals that are involved in the process of making it. That runs the prices up higher. It's not that anybody's trying to gouge anybody. It's just there's expense in manufacturing pigment alone before you manufacture the paint. So that's where those series come in. Okay, just because there's a color in one manufacturer that's super expensive and then super cheap in another manufacturer, that's why you always, just because something says cobalt blue doesn't mean it's this exact same thing, or doesn't mean it's the exact same amount of pigment. Okay, so if somebody is selling it over here for $3 and somebody's selling it over there for $40, which is more what it's supposed to be, you probably need to check what that pigment is in the $3 one. They might be using cobalt blue as the name and not adding hue. Okay, so that's the cadmium red deep. I'm gonna put these over here so we don't do them again. All right, cadmium red light. This is the same pigment, the PR108, but we're talking about the difference in handling of that color with heat or whatever. You can really see more the opacity in that, the thickness in that. This is much more ranging on kind of an orange look, right? Nice, rich, thick color. Excellent light fastnesses with the cadmiums. This is also a series 3, and they call this semi-opaque and this opaque, which I think I can kind of see. It just is a much kind of heavier pigment color to it. So that's really the difference. When you're talking, there's a medium with some materials, or it'll just say cadmium red. That means it's your medium if it only gives that. Then there should be a light, which is more towards the orange range. There should be a deep, which deep tends to have, the color's deeper, darker, but it's going to tend to have usually a little bit of a blue undertone to it. So you're going to know deep is what you want to use towards mixing those violets, purples, if you like to call it purple. Don't make me sad. Call it violet. Lights, obviously you would mix that more towards orange, right? Okay. Then alizarin crimson. Now, alizarin crimson is kind of a trade name. That doesn't mean that everybody's using the real alizarin crimson, the fugitive color. Some people do, some people don't. There's been, there's alizarin crimson permanent in some materials, which, especially with watercolor, that's what you're going to want to look towards because that's going to give you permanence. This is a beautiful color. This is PR83, which is actually alizarin crimson. And then they use PBK 11. PBK means black. Then 11 is Mars Black. Now, this is the PR83. Alizarin Crimson is a natural and I can never say this. Blah. Will has a copy of it, so now he's laughing at me. Anthraquinone dye that's made of the roots of the madder genus plant. So if you ever hear rose madder, madder lake, okay, it's fixed with aluminum or alum chloride, which are salts. So what they do is the dye is actually fixed to that. So fixed is kind of like they bond them together, okay, and that's how they are going to make that color. It depends on the type of metal salt that it's fixed on as far as to what the actual color is that you're going to be getting. So if they use different salts, the color is going to be altered somewhat. Now, I'm going to kind of scumble that on so you can see how nice and kind of transparent that is. All right. Inorganic, synthetic, natural, magnetic black iron oxide is what that Mars Black is, okay? Mars Black on its own is kind of a dark grayish or bluish black. Sometimes it has yellow undertones, which to me it's kind of got a little bit of a yellow undertone with this particular color. This color in and of itself is kind of a deep dark yellowish to Bordeaux violet red is what kind of alizarin crimson as a color is going to typically give you. It's staining with decent tinting strength. You can see how staining that is, and scumbling it across, it stained that pretty well. Decent tinting strength, it means it's going to hold its own pretty nicely with some white. Alizarin will fade or darken over time. It's still considered a fugitive pigment, but depending on the medium that you're suspending it in, which medium is, this is oil, right? Oil usually gives you the best bet as long as, depending on the pigment, you're not mixing it with some specific colors that can, like, change the color, can make it, we'll talk about phthalos, that phthalos can actually bronze out when they're used with different colors. So their formula of it in oil has very good light fastness, okay? So that's something that you want to look at, what the manufacturer's light fastness rating is on it, and decide, is that something that you can go with? If it doesn't have a great light fastness rating, or they don't have a light fastness rating, like with your fluorescents, that's something you need to consider. Those are going to fade very quickly, okay? All right, carmine. I'm gonna move this down so you can see the carmine. So with this, we're getting into the naphthal's, which I'm not, I don't know why. I guess I like more traditional colors. Naphthal's are quite a bit more modern, so I've not used a lot of them. So it was interesting to look at these, okay? You can really see, you can see the staining of that. This is PR 170. It's a naphthol red AS. There's a bunch of different naphthol pigments. So, and they're all called different weird things, and there's light fastness differences between them. So just because something says naphthol, make sure you look up the pigment number of that, because you can have from really good light fastness to really terrible light fastness very easily. So this is a pigment that you really want to check with. Look at how nice that is. That's a very nice, I guess that's really what kind of a carmine cherry red. This is a deep yellowish to a bluish version of the naphthol. Naphthol is a synthetic organic in the red azo compound family. Very staining, good tinting strength, so it's very strong against white. Now, what the difference is between those light fastness are the application and crystalline form of how they do the pigment, okay? The more opaque versions are significantly more light fast, so that's something to consider, which kind of is the kind of a trend that you're going to see as we go through this. It's going to say this particular color, carmine, is semi-transparent. It's a series 1. They have it rated as very good light fastness. Okay, so now we were talking about LUKAS red, so we're going to come to what is a brand trade name, okay? This is PR 254, which is a pyrrole red. It's a synthetic organic amino ketone, not to be confused with keto diet. This paint is not keto friendly. Okay, look at that. That's a very beautiful mass tone. This particular pigment is Ferrari red. This is the paint pigment that Ferrari uses for their red cars. It's also used a lot for fire engines. So this is one of the paints that comes from kind of the automotive industry. Look at that's got some real big punch to it. Staining, super high tinting strength. It's used as a light fast and non-toxic replacement for cad reds and for carmine. Because remember we talked about that like with the carmine, some of the light fastness, the color that they use for that can be kind of wishy-washy depending on the medium. This is something that, like this would be, it's pretty similar to that. If you squint, I can't really tell the difference. Can you? Well, I can see it's just slightly kind of maybe got a little bluer undertone to it when I'm holding it up against here, but the camera might not even be able to pick up how different that is. So that's something that LUKAS Red can be used as that replacement. This particular, this is pyrrole. It replaces a lot of the older naphthol reds because of that light fastness. Semi-opaque, Series 3. Exceptional light fastness. So we're good there. And I've got red everywhere. All right. All right, so magenta red primary. This is kind of where things are a little strange. All right. Magenta red primary. PW6. Will, do you know what that is? PW?
No. I'm learning too.
PR is a pigment red. So what would you assume PW might be?
White.
White. PW6 is titanium white. And then this is PV23. What do you think PV would be?
Violet?
Did you look that up?
No.
Okay, you're right. So this material, this paint, is actually made from titanium. PW6 is titanium white. PV23 is actually a dioxazine violet, I believe. Yes. So look how it makes this. This is not what you would expect dioxazine and white to look like, right? Again, changes in how the preparation of the pigment is. Dioxazine violet is a synthetic organic. It's got deep dark blue or red shade for the violet. See how that's, you can really kind of see that's obviously much more the red shade, right? Definitely erring more on red than blue. I just got paint on my spot. I'm going to need another bit of paint for. It's very staining. It has excellent tinting strength. That red shade, higher light fastness, or the red shade like this, is going to be a higher light fastness than the blue shade, especially in oils and acrylics over watercolor. For some reason, dioxazine does not do well when it's done in a watercolor form, depending on kind of what the manufacturer's formulation is for that. So that's something that you need to kind of be aware of is oils and acrylics, yes. Watercolor, not so much. Because if they put adulterants and fillers and things like that in it, that can really affect the light fastness on it. This color, obviously, semi-transparent, Series 1, excellent light fastness. Primary means that if you're using more of like the old color processing design background, color mixing, you'll have the magenta red, you'll have cyan for your primary blue, and then you'll have, depending on the manufacturer, like a lemon yellow or something that's a primary, okay? So that's something that's used if you're using that version of color mixing. Which, being a red, it would probably make really nice violets. It might make some weird oranges. Okay. All right, so vermilion deep. Are we doing okay with questions? Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
I'm going to do...
But everyone's really enjoying the in-depthness
Okay.
of this. So.
I'm going to do the Vermilion Deep and the Vermilion Light at the same time because I think that this is a very interesting difference in the two. There is a difference. So Vermilion Deep is PR9. PR9 is a naphthol AS red. It's a synthetic organic mono naphthol, bright yellowish red with blue or pink undertones, which you can definitely see. I can see really easy when I do this. It fades in watercolors. It's much better in oils and acrylics. The light fastness lowers with this particular pigment when you do tints. So if you're adding white to it, that can actually change that. So that's something to be aware of. Semi-opaque, Series 1, very good light fastness. The Vermilion Light.
Can you shift the sheet over just an inch or two?
Yes, this way. There we go. Vermilion Light, PO. Well, what does that mean?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Orange,
Think
the
of,
same, right?
huh?
Orange?
PO is pigment orange. So even though this is the same color, they're using vermilion as a trade name with this. Okay. This is actually the pyrazolone orange, PO34. It's a synthetic orange diarylide pigment, bright orange to orange red. Obviously, this is probably more of the orange red shade, but to me, this just looks like orange. This looks like a replacement for cadmium orange to me. It's nice, and I mean, that looks nice and opaque, like a cad orange. Staining, average tinting strength. It fades and darkens again in watercolor paints with poor light fastness. The light fastness performance is better in oils and acrylics, especially the more opaque. So obviously, this is nice and opaque, so that's going to have great light fastness. It has very good light fastness, so it's not going to have good, because good is not as good as what? Very good, right? Or excellent, next step up. So that's going to be, to me, it would depend on how this color mixes with white and black. This might be a great, you know, it's a Series 1. It might be a really nice, if I played with it, I'd play with it and see it. And for some reason, I love cadmium orange. I've got like 3 giant tubes of it from a couple different manufacturers because I like it in all of them, and it's different. So this, in seeing this, I would be really curious to take this and play with it and see how it compares against those oranges that I love, because that's a much less pricey replacement. All right, so Geranium Lake. Another naphthol red. This is PR 112. Push this there. This is a naphthol red ASD, a synthetic organic monoazole naphthol. See how we're, the numbers for the naphthols jump all over the place. So just because it's close together doesn't mean it's the same pigment. Obviously, this is a big jump from what some of the other pigments are. That's nice. Intense, bright, yellowish red. Yeah, I would say, especially on this with just using a brush, I can see the undertones of the yellow. Heavy staining, good tint strength. This does fade or darken in watercolors, again, because it's naphthol, so just remember that. If you have a color, you know, all the colors in oil don't translate to acrylics because they might not work with an acrylic resin medium. And it's the same with watercolor. So you may be using these things in your watercolor paintings and not realize this might be why you're having, you know, fading issues with watercolor. So this is why we're talking about the pigments, really not so much the mediums themselves. So, so that's semi-transparent, which to me that's more semi-opaque. Series 1, very good light fastness. Magenta, oh, I put that over there. Okay. This is the permanent red. We'll do the quinacridone red first. I put them one in front of the other. This is a new color. Nobody even has this yet. We've not gotten the order in yet for this. This was the sample tube that they sent to approve the color. So this is the actual from the manufacturer, the check this out and see if you like it. This is PV19, which is what, Will?
Violet.
A violet. You know, you're going to do really well at trivia if it ever has anything to do with...
What color starts with B?
Right.
Got that one.
Right. Okay. This is a quinacridone violet. It's PV19. Oh, I love quinacridones. Look at that. That's just lovely. A synthetic organic. It is similar to PR107, but it has a different crystalline structure and particle size. That is what makes it look very different. It has bright to deep bluish to reddish violet. You can definitely see kind of a very hot kind of a blue undertone in there. Staining, good tinting strength. It dulls and fades with a hue shift towards blue over time in watercolor and inks. So if you've got a PV19 quinacridone red, you will have some fading in those water medias because they don't protect the pigment particles from light, okay? Oils and acrylics are different because you've got it in a viscous suspension, all right? Excellent light fastness in oils and acrylics. So quinacridone's been, you know, slowly, the quinacridone reds and violets and stuff, and have been colors that artists really start to depend on and they really like. So that's why we're bringing these in. We're bringing in a whole bunch of different really awesome colors, but I'm very happy about that quinacridone. All right, so then we've got permanent red. This is PR255. This is a pyrrole scarlet. Synthetic organic, I'm going to butcher this, I can just tell. Dictopyrrolio-pyrrole. I don't,
Like me.
yeah, I'm just telling you, that's what it says. It is a bright red with slight yellow to it. Definitely the case when you do that drawdown of the mass tone. It is definitely, it says semi-opaque. Yeah, okay, I'm going to say that. I think there was just a lot of oil in the beginning of the tube when I opened it up. Semi-opaque, I'll go with that. It's used a lot in cad red and vermilion hues. So what does that mean? That means if a manufacturer says cad red hue or vermilion hue, that means it's not whatever the actual pigment would be for that normal trade name. It's something else that's meant to look like that paint in mass tone. What is mass tone? When I'm taking this and I'm drawing it down like that and leaving it nice and thick like this, mass tone is what that kind of thicker pull looks like. What it looks like with a nice, thick kind of layer of paint on there, okay? So that's used like that because it's going to perform similarly. Does it look as kind of opaque as these do if I was going against those real cadmiums? No, but it's close enough where, I mean, that's nice. It's a little less orange to me than that cad red light. This would make a really nice maybe cad red medium. So something to know. It is a series 4 because pyrrole is pricey. So it's not like it's going to save you a lot of money, but if you're looking for something that's not cadmium to kind of be healthier with the color, that would work. Do we have questions? You look like...
Actually, that was one of the questions, was what is a good, the best substitution for cad red?
It just depends.
Oil.
Yeah, it depends on what you're wanting to do. That obviously is one of the ones that they say in that website that is a recommendation, and I think there was another one that we talked about as well. So, all right, so we're done with the reds.
And one more question. Was
Sure,
asked
go ahead.
what lake meant in pigment.
We're going to talk about that. Oh, no, okay, so lake was when it's something like that alizarin, when it's made from a dye that's then fixed to something like a salt or a silica or something like that. It's not a straight up, this little ground stuff color is the pigment. It's actually a dye, which is a liquid dye you squirt in. It absolutely just goes with the water and becomes something that's a liquid, right? Pigment stays a particle. If you sprinkle the pigment into oil without mixing it and grinding it together, just so it kind of, to the eye, looks like a solid entity, it's gonna be like speckly spotty, like putting pepper on your eggs when you scramble them, okay? So where a dye isn't. A dye is that actual emulsion where it becomes a single unit. So what they do is they make that dye and then they fix it. I'm not a chemist, so I can't tell you how, but I'm guessing it involves putting the silica and the salts in there and just heating the mess out of it until it kind of evaporates, and then that dye is fixed to the silica or salt that's a granular form that then can be ground with the medium like the oil or the acrylic. That's what a lake is. So that's why when they talk about those, depending on what the suspension is of the medium, oil and acrylic are going to offer it some protection for light fastness. Where typically, if it's a lake, it's not going to be as light fast unless it's like madder lake hue, meaning it's really not that. It's meant to look like that, okay? So that's why, and it's, a lot of those are just, they darken and discolor with time. They might not disappear because fugitive sounds like somebody's on the run. You're never going to see it again. Your alizarin crimson's going to be here for 3 years, and then suddenly it disappears and it's gone from the painting. A lot of times, instead of staying that beautiful red, it darkens down into like a burnt sienna, and then maybe like a burnt umber, and then kind of looks blackish. So that's what the fugitive means with that. So with those, they tend to just kind of fade slowly, okay? But again, we're also talking that's why there's light fastness ratings now, so that it's not you having to figure this out by somebody who buys a painting from you coming back in 10 years and saying, half of this painting's like faded and gone, right? So that's where you get, if it's something that is a lake, but it's still got, very good light fastness, that means it's going to be lasting 75, 100 years, okay? All right. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now with the blues. How are we doing on time? Because I feel like we're going kind of slow, but we can try to speed it up.
16.
Okay.
12.
Huh?
612.
Okay. All right, we can speed this along. Okay, their cerulean blue is PW5, Will. PW?
Pigment white.
All right, and PB?
Pigment blue.
All right.
PBK is black, right?
Right. So their cerulean blue is PW5 and PB36. Now, when they're putting these on the label, that means that if it says PW5, that means there's going to be more white in this than blue, okay? If it's something where you got 3 or 4 pigments, it's just like cereal. The first ingredient is what the majority of it's made out of, and then the smaller it gets down, further it gets down the line, the less of it that's in there, right? So their cerulean blue actually has some PW5 in it. What is PW5? It's actually a lithopone white. When we get to the whites, we'll go over what that means. So the PB36 is cobalt chromite. Okay, so you can see this makes a very nice, very kind of semi-opaque to opaque. Let me move these so we can kind of slide this up as we're getting further down the pike here. There we go. Ooh, perfect. All right. See, that is a nice semi-opaque. Inorganic cobalt chromite blue-green spinel composition. This was created in 1805, so it's been around a while, but it was not released to artists until the 1860s, and it was called Cerulean then with an O, because it's the British and they like to add extra vowels. So it was loved and widely used by the Impressionists for skies, for water, for all sorts of nice things like that. Pigments, some view the pigment as brighter and cleaner than PB35, which is a true cerulean blue, which can be really dull. And I think that probably has something to do with either the grinding or the processing. Maybe it has to do with the particle size. Maybe it's got to be larger. So that's something where that's why this has become so popular, because it's just got a little bit better brightness. Now, to me, this has some white in it, so it's done to lighten it up, because this is obviously a much darker kind of chroma of this color. And anytime you add white to a dark color, it tends to kind of dull it out a little. But you can see adding a little bit of just medium with it, kind of with there being a little bit of, you know, the lavender words. It's there's oil and there's painting medium, so I'm just starting to get really relaxed now. The Chelsea lavender essence on it, it's giving it a little bit of sparkle. So adding some oil or things like that, it's going to make it refract a little nicer. Okay, so this particular, the cobalt chromite, has kind of light greenish blue hues, and you can see that kind of as you pull that across. Good tinting strength. It's semi-opaque, but I wonder how much of that is by adding some of that white with it. It's a Series 4, excellent light fastness. All right, so let's toss that over there. So then we've got the manganese cerulean blue. This is the PB36, so it's got that cobalt chromite in it. And then they do something interesting with it, so we'll kind of see how it looks when it's pulled down. It's got phthalo green in it. The PG7 is actually phthalo green. Oops, and I forgot to write that on there. I'm sorry, guys. So PB36, PG7. Yeah, so you can really see that kind of green undertone in that. That's definitely much more red. The straight up cerulean, which manganese has kind of got a little bit more kind of a green cast to it. That's a really nice color. So we already just talked about that cobalt chromite. So the phthalo green, we're obviously not talking about greens today, so let's discuss it really quick. Introduced in 1943, so relatively recent, the phthalos. It's a polychlorinated copper phthalocyanine, which that's why they call it phthalo, because it sounds like horribly dangerous. It's not. Copper is used in making phthalos. So deep greenish blue shade, heavily staining. Why? Because it's got that phthalo in it. Overpowering tinting strength. Anytime phthalo, one of the phthalos, is going to be in your tube of paint, you are going to need to be aware of that. Always use way more white and just tiny touches of that color that has the phthalo in it, just so you're not wasting a whole lot of paint and then having to add a lot more white, and a lot more white, and a lot more white, and a lot more white, okay? Now, phthalo green can bronze over time, but we're talking decades to centuries before the noticeable effects. Again, something where you know, when you've got it in that oil suspension, maybe even adding a little bit more oil, it's going to help protect it a lot more and keep that from happening, okay? Also, sometimes that's why you want to varnish paintings, because colors can have some weird stuff happen without a little bit of protection. So varnish isn't just always to protect your painting. It can protect your color. All right. Any other, any questions on any of that?
Not yet.
Okay. So Series 2, excellent light fastness. Not a surprise with those two pigments. Cobalt blue.
After you write that, can you push it up just a little bit?
Yes, I will be happy to. And this is PB28. There we go. Thank you for mentioning that. Cobalt blue, discovered in 1882. It's an inorganic pigment, cobalt illumate blue spinel. This is produced at very high temperatures to get this color. Now, cobalts can range from greenish to a mid-shade blue. Some cobalts, like we did the blue, we did the artist pigment show, and I should have written that down. But it's, if you can go to the top of the episode here, there will be the description, and then there's additional links. You can go to that and look at the different shows that we've done over the past. There is one that we did pretty early on, I think it was the first year, that talks about artist and student grade pigments. Cobalt blue was one of the colors we used for oils. We did a magenta for acrylics, and we did a lemon yellow for watercolors. But we talked about and we looked at the differences in cobalt blue, and we found that Sennelier had actually a different cobalt color, which was much redder. And that was like the color that I really love the cobalt of. That explained why, because I'd never looked at it. I just knew that it was a cobalt pigment, never realized that it was a different cobalt pigment. So medium staining, fair tinting strength for cobalts. Over time, they may whiten slightly to a more pastel shade. And then if you mix it with lead white, it can darken. So if you still use any lead whites, flake white is lead white, Kremitz white has lead in it, that can actually darken the color over time. It can lighten, again, always good to varnish, helps things like this from happening, but it can lighten slightly over time as a pigment otherwise. Semi-opaque, series 4, excellent light fastness. One of my favorite blues. All right. I'm starting to get where
Patty Sheldon says, the color of her car.
Oh, nice. All right. All right, phthalo. We've talked about phthalos being punch you in the face. Phthalo blue. You will see that in a second. There are different formulations of this. PB15 means phthalo blue. This is a PB15 3, which is phthalocyanine blue, blue-green shade. Anytime it says BG, blue-green. RS, it's red shade, right? So the different, like after PB, there's a 15. It's kind of just a more neutral. It can change the formulation of kind of what that color looks like when you thin it or do a drawdown. This is a really nice, they make a nice phthalo blue. It's a synthetic organic made from beta copper thiocyanine. Intense deep blue mass tone, obviously, right, we can see that right there. Green shade blue shows in shades and mixing, but not really so much. I mean, that's highly staining, but to me that doesn't really so much look red or green. So it's going to be when you're actually lightening it with white that you're going to be able to see those things. And we talk about anytime you get a new tube of paint, obviously I'm using a lot with this to make it more obvious so you can see it. You barely have to use any at all to do this at home. Anytime you get new paint, it's always good to swatch it, do a little bit of a mass tone like this, do a little bit of one brush stroke so you can see how transparent, how opaque it is. And then I always mix it 50% with white and paint a small swatch under it, because what that does is a lot of these blues and reds look very much the same, but I can see when I lighten a red, does it make more of like a salmon pink? Does it make more of a magenta, kind of a purpley pink? If you don't try those things first and then you need to make a pink and you've got 20 reds, you're either going to be wasting a lot of time at that point then using all those reds to find that right pink, or painting it over and over when it's not the one that you wanted. Then if you've already done this and you keep these swatches somewhere after they've dried, pull them out, oh yeah, that's the one that I really like for this. Obviously after time, you'll know because you've used it enough, but it's a good thing to take just a few minutes of time, play with the color, and then you'll actually know kind of what to do with it. Phthalo, always remember, punch you in the face. So it's going to be super heavy staining, super overpowering in a tint. It may, as a color, dull or darken over time, but again, decades to centuries before it's going to be noticeable. Transparent, Series 1, excellent light fastness. It's a fantastic blue for kind of multi-purpose use. Okay, we talked about cyan blue being our primary, but what does that mean? And different manufacturers are going to use different blues for this, so who knows? So this is PW4, which is zinc white, and PB15-3, which is that phthalo blue green shade that we just looked at, okay? You can definitely see the white in there. This almost looks purpley on my screen, but I know that my screen is wrong since I look like I'm wearing an orange shirt. And that's okay. All right, so see, you can see look at, that's a really nice rich blue, isn't it? You can see with the white, that's made that a lot more opaque than ever here, hasn't it? It's a significant difference. Only in kind of that little kind of thinned area, I can see the green influence right there when I thin that out. Obviously, I wouldn't want to thin it to that extreme with a solvent, but that helps me kind of see what that undertone color is. Okay, so we just learned about phthalo blue, so we know this is going to have all those same kind of hallmark traits. It's just got that white in there to make it more opaque. And again, if a color's more opaque, what? It's going to have excellent light fastness without even having to think about it. It's kind of a good way of you know, not having to look at light fastness rating. If it's more opaque, you kind of know. All right, and I'm going to put this way since I'm blocking that. All right, so okay, I need my glasses again because I can't read the labels. Cerulean blue hue. PW4, what's that? Zinc white. PB15, what was that one again? Phthalo blue 1, which is the red shade. And then we've got a new player, PB16. That's a new one for me. I had to look it up. Heliogen blue L7560, which is a phthalo turquoise color. So this is a mixture of those colors. It's synthetic organic pigments. You can definitely see kind of that greener color in there. Oh wow, yeah, that's really nice. Look at that. Definitely you can see the turquoise in it. So that makes a really nice kind of medium blue. Obviously it's pretty semi-opaque there. They say opaque. To me, I guess it's a contention of it's one or the other. Series 1, excellent light fastness. That's giving you kind of that look of cerulean blue. Let's put them together just so. Okay. Light is shiny. Yeah. Let me see if I can, there we go. There we go. Okay, it's just a little kind of deeper to me, you know, but it's a nice way to have that cerulean with that suddenly becomes a series 1, so it's similar enough in mass tone where if you don't have to have it exact, it's going to give you kind of some of those same performance qualities. Prussian blue. This is definitely one of my favorite colors. It's funny because I didn't know this until I was looking this up. This was a big color used by Picasso during his blue period, which, I mean, I guess he was using blue, but I did not realize that it was the Prussian. I went through a blue period in college, and that was about one of the only colors I used, because you could use it like black or lighten it, but look at this beautiful deep blue. It's harder to see in that mass tone. It looks almost black. This is PB27. Still looks kind of black. I'm going to add just a touch of white so you can kind of see. Well, actually, that just was really awesome. You can see on the thing. See how much blue? That's with it kind of wiped off. You can see that blue up under it when it's thin. So if you make that more transparent, wow, you really have to. There we go. See what a pretty blue that makes? It's just a nice deep blue. It's a synthetic organic pigment. It's produced by the oxidization of ferrocyanide salts. And the hue depends on the prep method and the particle size that you get out of it. Deep blue with greenish undertone, definitely has that. Staining, high staining, a good tint strength. It does turn brownish in the presence of alkalis or heats. So if you use alkalis or salts, right? So if you've got another color that's high in salt, that has salts in it, that can be a problem, or heat. So something to be aware of. Transparent, Series 1, excellent light fastness. I know we're getting close on time, but yes, go ahead. Ask some questions. Why?
2 questions. Before we get too far away from the Cerulean, one question was, why would you use Cerulean hue over Cerulean?
Cost effectiveness is probably the biggest thing. Is not everybody wants a higher series color to invest in that. So you know, if you like this, you know, it may not be as big of a deal to use it. And to me, this already has white in it. It's phthalo, so you know that you know, it's got a lot of punch to it. You have to add very little to mix white. The Cerulean can start looking sort of grayed out and bland with a lot of white added to it. So this still has, being a phthalo, remember that clean color mixing? That's something where that's going to give you that clean color mixing, so that really can help.
And I'm glad someone else asked this because I was curious.
Yeah.
What's the difference between semi-opaque versus semi-transparent?
It's you have to be pretty on the spot to catch the difference. One is going to look a little bit more on the border of opaque, and everybody's kind of eye for it's different. So some manufacturers will say something semi-transparent, and I'm like, no. And then some will say something semi-opaque, and I'm like, no. So that's why the reason you need to know this is if you go to mix colors, right? The more transparent it is, especially if you're using white, you won't you will have to add more of the color with the white to make the same tint as something that's more opaque. That's why when we talk about tinting strength, so that's why one of the reasons that's important. But also, you don't have to add 3 or 4 layers. If something's transparent and you like the color in mass tone, but you're not going to apply it with a palette knife like this, you're just going to brush it on with a brush, you might have to add 5, 6, 7 layers before suddenly it becomes more opaque. So if you can find another color that's similar in mass tone that you can paint straight on with one stroke, right, and get it opaque, you've just saved yourself a whole lot of time, especially in oils where something is wet for, depending on the color, forever, like Mars Black. So that's something that's why that's you know, important. Just remember, the more transparent, the cleaner color mixing. So that's something that, you know, is, if something's semi-transparent, you're going to mix colors cleaner than semi-opaque. All right. All right. So we've got Paris blue. Paris blue is partially Prussian blue, that PB27, and then the phthalo green that we talked about a few minutes ago. It is lighter than that phthalo, or than the Prussian, which is right next to it. See how much bluer that is? It's almost redder than this. This is definitely greener looking. It's so shiny, I'm sorry. All right, I'm going to try to make this thinner. All right, let me see if I can tilt it. And it's just making it still shiny. Oh, there we go. Okay. See the two, the Prussian blue is redder to me. And then that Paris blue is a slight bit greener. Okay. So this color is completely transparent. It's just because it's so dark that it looks opaque. Kind of like that Prussian blue, it's a transparent color, but just because it's that darker value, it's harder to see that it is transparent. Now, which is going to make cleaner color mixing? You only have one color in this, right? But then you've paired it with another transparent color, which is a phthalo. So theoretically, they're going to mix pretty similarly. And that's a Series 1 also, you know, excellent light fastness. So it's just, if you need something that's more kind of that red, the Prussian blue, more a green, kind of that. These work really nice as a black. They're not black, but they read as a black. So if you're doing something like landscapes, that Paris blue might read, because it's got the green in it, might read as kind of a forest undertone that's black under plants or shadows, where the Prussian blue might be better for, say, a seascape, right? For those blacks. All right, so we've talked about colors with ultramarine. It's the PB29. Ultramarine blue dates back to the Renaissance, where it was made out of lapis lazuli, or lazuli. Everybody pronounces it wacky. I don't know what the difference is. It's from Afghanistan. But it's a stone, right? It's a stone. That's what this is made out of, because I just really love the color. The pigment was so expensive originally that it was worth more than its weight in gold. That is why you see in medieval paintings, Mary is always done in blue, right? It's that lapis lazuli, because that's like very much honoring her. It's very much the reflecting her status and her power as the mother of Christ. So, and see with that thin, that's a really nice blue. Okay, so ultramarine blue can still be made of a number of things. Obviously, most people aren't making it from lapis lazuli. That's called its own pigment. It's still the PB29, but it's actually, the color is going to be called the lapis lazuli. That is a mineral source. It's got different working capabilities than like what we're used to now, you and I, as an ultramarine blue. It contains iron pyrite crystals, which cause a slight sparkle. So that's why some people still want to work with that pigment. Still incredibly expensive because of, depending on where it comes from. If it's right from Afghanistan, it's going to be the real deal. It comes from other parts of the world. They're just not as pure, okay? The synthetic form, and chemically they're the same in a lab. You just have the impurities in the lapis lazuli because it's a natural stone, right? The synthetic form was termed French ultramarine. Some people just call it ultramarine. Some manufacturers will straight up call it French ultramarine because that was the way of knowing which meant what, okay? They're chemically identical, I just said, without the impurities. It's a polysulfide of sodium, potassium, lithium, or silver aluminosilicate. Say that 3 times fast.
Or once.
Right. Yeah, clearly that's not working. It was created in 1820 by a French chemist, Jean-Baptiste Gumet. I'm hoping that's how it's pronounced. Ultramarine blue is a bright deep blue ranging from violet to a mid blue shade. This has a really nice kind of violet undertone to it. That hue difference can depend on the ratios of the silica and alumina that are in it. So it may be more bluish green. It may be more blue violet. Staining, good natural tinting strength. Natural forms are going to be duller in appearance. Avoid mixing this with chrome yellow. Those are chemicals that don't play well together and you will have bad things happen. Transparent, series 1, excellent light fastness. I'm doing royal blue after the ultramarine because this is made partially with ultramarine. So this is going to give you a way of seeing. Royal blue is obviously just a trade name. It's a color that they've come up with. It's got PW5, so it's that lithopone, and it's got PB29. So it is a tint of their ultramarine blue. It is opaque. It is series 1. It's a very nice color. If you are going to use a color like this a lot, this helps you avoid having to necessarily sit and mix it yourself. But obviously you can mix it yourself. Their opaque white is the PW5, is the lithopone. So if you like this color, but you know you're not going to use a ton of it, you can buy the ultramarine blue, you can buy the opaque white, and you can make it yourself. Kind of like when we looked at all those greens, and we looked at kind of how Charvin did the greens, and we mixed our own color. That was one of the colors that was a color mix. That's what you get. That's why I wanted to show that royal blue, so you could see that you can do that yourself. Do we have time for the 2 last blues? It's indigo and blue black. Do you want to just jump to the whites and we can be done?
Go through it.
Huh?
I say let's go for it.
Will's such a sport. You're a sport. Okay, so we'll do them real quick. Indigo. Indigo starting to get a little trickier here. We've got PR 176, which is an azo carmine, essentially. PB 15, Will?
Blue. Blue.
They look blue. That's good. Good. And it's the PB15-1, so it's the red shade. PB29, we just talked about that. What was that one?
Ultramarine.
Ultramarine. Wow. And then PBK7.
Lamp black.
You cheater! Yeah, he's got. I forgot I gave him the notes. I was like, wow, he's doing so well. He's such a cheater. That's okay. I'm gonna let you get by with it this time. I was so impressed, and then here you're just cheat sheeting it. Not giving Will Cliff Notes ever again. All right, so this indigo, because it's got a red in it from the carmine, it's got the phthalo blue, that's the red shade. It's got the ultramarine blue, which we can see kind of as a violet-y color, and then it's got the black. It's almost making like to me, a purple black, which is what kind of a good indigo should look like. That color that's the azo carmine is a really nice dull kind of bluish red. High staining and tinting. So if you've got that and then you've got that phthalo blue, which is high staining and tinting as well, you're going to know that you don't want to add a lot of this to a tint to not lose control of it really easy. You want to just dip your brush in that and have a nice kind of pile of white to make the color more white than that indigo blue. Now this color, it does have 1, 2, 3, 4 pigments in it, which remember, the more pigments you add, the dirtier a color can get. It looks grayer when you're mixing it, muddier, if you will. However, the lamp black is medium staining and it's a good tinting strength. It's got kind of a deep black brown undertone. Lamp black is carbon that's made from soot. The way they make it is it's a byproduct of burning petroleum or natural gas. It used to be lamps, that's why they called it lamp black back in the days before electricity. But because this is a semi-transparent color, it's got 4 colors, but it's semi-transparent. So remember how we talked about how those colors tend to mix and make cleaner colors, so you're kind of already starting off well. If this was an opaque color that had 4 colors in it, it's already looking a little cloudy. It's going to be worse if you're adding a lot of extra colors to it. So so that was that's a nice blue. I love how violet-y looking it is. Then blue black, which is kind of cheating, because you already know what you're getting into, right? This is a chromatic black. When we say chroma, we're talking about that this looks like in mass tone black, but there's no black pigments in it. So we've got PR 264, which is a pyrrole red rubine. We have PB, which is blue 27, which is that Prussian blue up here. Then we have PG7, which is that phthalo green. Green and red are complementary colors, right? So how do you get a chromatic black? You mix complementary colors together. So the red rubine as a color on its own, a pigment on its own, tends to be a deep ruby red with a violet undertone, which is nice when it's mixed with that green. Prussian blue we've already talked about. Phthalo green we've already talked about. You can really see the phthalo green in this. This is a very nice kind of, even more green than that Paris blue. So again, landscape painters rejoice. This is, instead of having to use black, let me thin it a little bit. Oh yeah, see, you can kind of see that little bit of green kind of on that side. That's really nice. That's reminds me very much of the when we did the black and white episode of the chromatic black that Gamblin makes that we or no, Winsor Newton makes that we all were crazy over. That's nice. So so again, kind of a nice alternative to a true black. Whites, we've got 3 of them in the LUKAS line. I'm going to move this up so that we don't have to kind of see them all here. So we've got the opaque white, which is PW5, which is lithopone. We have the zinc white, which is PW4. Then we've got their titanium white, which PW6. Now, they used to make it with a little bit of zinc in it. They don't now because of the issues potentially with cracking that happen in some different oil paintings because of either painting procedure or thickness of paint or improper layering or just being on a flexible surface with a more brittle color and cracking. Oops, and I've got a little bit of, have to forgive that, oh good, it hid. Picked up a little bit of that blue black in there. So that is a very opaque white. You can't even see it on the thing. It matches that perfectly. So when we're talking about lithopone, lithopone's an inorganic color. It's very opaque. This is going to be the most opaque of all of these whites that we're talking about. And I don't even know if it's worth thinning out because you're just not going to be able to see it. It is a duller, grayer white than PW4, which is zinc, or PW6, which you can see. This is an off-white. This totally vanishes in that off-white. It's non-staining. It's fair tinting strength depending on the binding medium. Sometimes the lithopone is actually used as a base for those lake pigments, right? Okay, so, and also it's used typically in gouaches. Because it gives that opacity that these other colors don't give, so that you have to use less binder, kind of that kind of chalky filler that they use to make those opaque. So Series 1, excellent light fastness, nice, you know, overall kind of natural white without the kind of extra brightness and shine. Zinc white. Zinc is an inorganic pigment, natural mineral form of manganese impurities. You can see that's got some kind of more shine to it. It's a little kind of, says translucent white with a slightly warm undertone. Some brands may be slightly bluish white. I've always found theirs is a little warmer. To me, it's not cooler. So it's kind of a nice color. Actually, it's made by a byproduct of brass production, which is kind of cool. So, interesting side note. Staining with good tinting strength, lightens slightly with age, it becomes more opaque, even though it's a semi-opaque color. Excellent light fastness. Titanium white is the white that if you want to make tints and you want to make them very pastel, remember we talk about titanium white being that punch you in the face white, you can actually see that on there. Of the ones that are there, I can see that very easily. It's very, very bright, very white. And it kind of, this is bright because it's got some sheen to it because there was a little more oil in the formulation. Titanium white tends to really soak the oil up. The opaque white is very matte, flat. So this is going to be, if you want to make something tint and it really pop, really be a very bright pastel color, titanium is what you are going to want to use of the two. Okay, the three in their line. And not everybody uses lithopone, so it's something to, you know, and with this saying this is an opaque white, notice that that lithopone was in a lot of these colors where they were lightening them. Why? Because they wanted to make them opaque. So they used this as opposed to the zinc, as opposed to the titanium. All right. Winners, Will. Winners. Do we have other questions? Are people good? Are you waving at me?
Does LUKAS make a fast drying white?
They do not. There are mediums that you can add to colors to make fast drying white. The problem with the fast drying white a lot of times is that you will get cracking. It's one thing if you're trying to use it as an underpainting white only. It's another thing if you're putting it with colors that are faster or slower drying. A lot of colors have very varied drying times. And if you're mixing a fast drying white with a color that really wants to dry slow, like a Mars Black, you are going to have some serious technical problems. So although it's like a fancy, yay, happy thing, and it's funny because I know that Michael Harding was very against quick fast dry whites, and he finally caved and made one, but he has like warnings all over the place on that page for that product because he really feels that it's not the best thing to utilize. So it might be better to use a more drying medium, a leaner medium, and kind of work within that bounds where things are going to dry slightly kind of more even than use that. But it does exist out there. LUKAS just does not make it.
As far as swatching the whites go, would it make sense to do it over a neutral gray color or just stick with the surface you'll be working on?
You can do that if you typically work on a toned ground. Swatch a monotone ground so you can kind of see how it goes with that specific tone ground. You can typically, as it dries, you can see it. And it's hard to see in the studio because of our lights and stuff. But guys, I can totally see the difference in these whites. If I was swatching this, I would just do it like this. But what I do is instead of a 50% white that I mix with this, I'll mix whatever my neutral color is that I like to use for a black. I typically do not use black at all because they tend to dry really slow. I like using something like these that tends to be kind of a chromatic black. So I'll use it with the 50%, whatever I'm using with it black. If you have a black that you really like, mix it with that 50-50, because that's a really good way. You'll see that this opaque white is going to be like pretty decent tinting strength. It's going to balance each other out. The zinc white, it will be a lot darker value-wise. The titanium white, it'll be a lot lighter value-wise than the opaque or the zinc. So that's a good way to be able to see kind of what it's going to do. Mixing, always do 50-50. If you do this enough with your swatching, you'll be able to tell pretty quickly. Just a little tiny squirt next to it. You can get really good at production sizing your little bits of paint. Is there anything else?
No,
I'll go back through here and answer questions. I can't do those on YouTube. Leave a message, a comment on the video itself. I can see those and access those. Unless I sit down and watch the video for YouTube, I can't see anybody's questions if we've missed anything. So definitely do it that way. If you use YouTube. With Facebook, I can go on the platform and I can answer any of these questions that either I didn't hit or that I'm sure there's a lot of questions that Will might not have been able to get them, and the girls were feeding him the questions. So I will get to it. So please, it might be a little bit, but I will get to your question and answer it. Okay. But again, I know this is boring and this is something that's like, yay, it's kind of fun to watch the paint go down, but this is not what we want to do. We want to go paint. This is annoying. Really
interesting for everybody.
Okay, well, good. Yeah. Because although I understand the value of it and I do it, it annoys me because it's not as exciting as a demo. But guys, this is the type of knowledge that can make you so much better overnight because you know more about the pigments you're using and the colors you're using and how the transparents are different than the opaques and those types of things that are these tricks that other people are not going to take the time to learn, and that most teachers don't teach because people will be in the class and be going, oh, I want to go home. So if you've made it this far, bully for you. Thank you. And I expect more exciting paintings from you just because of this knowledge. So, all right. So we had the red, white, and blue contest, the at-home art contest, and there were some really awesome ones. And but we had to narrow it down to 3. And so these are the winners. We've got third place for a $100 e-gift card is Karen St. Clair from Oklahoma. I'm going to put them, should I put them there? I think that would be better. Let me slide this up because then we can kind of, obviously that's a really nice little pastel. That is the coolest. I've never seen anybody do that where you can see the smoke and the fireworks and obviously what it is and the excited child watching. This was really, really cool. So very nice. Third place. The second place winner, and I'm sorry if I I'm sorry, Martin, if I butcher your last name. I'm guessing it's Karazov from Miami, Florida. Very beautiful and timely portrait there. Go on the webpage and pull this up. The detail is wonderful. It's just a great piece of artwork. A $250 e-gift card for you, sir. And then first place, and I don't, did you see these, Will?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So you know I was like, I love this. Is Mike Kupka of Franklin Square, New York. And it's my man, Captain America. And that didn't have anything to do with it because I wasn't the only one picking, but I campaigned very hard. So the detail in this was incredible. And just, I love how kind of, it's just beautifully rendered. So that is a $500 e-gift card for you. So congratulations. Next week's challenge, it's mini paintings. This is Katie's write-up. They say good things come in small packages, and art is no exception. We've seen masterpieces so tiny that they fit on something as small as a grain of rice or the eraser of a pencil, on the back of a coin, a kitchen tile, even a subway card. This week we want to see your smallest masterpieces, any medium, any subject, any style, as long as they are small. I suggest if they're small, using something like a coin or something, ruler next to it, so we can appreciate the size of it. So, and this is really cool. It's going to be fun to see. My great-grandmother was a miniatures painter, so I'm really curious to see what people come up with this. So
Next week's size does matter.
it does, apparently. Well, and what's funny is next week we're doing watercolor draw and paint along postcards, and the kit for it is super cheap. It is $20.31. You can pull up what I'm going to be using for this next week. You'll put in keyword JL160 on the search bar on the jerrysartorama.com website, and it will show you the little kit that I'll be using. If you watched any of my art at home filming that we did while we were quarantined, we actually did this episode with little postcards in this beautiful little set of watercolors by LUKAS that's pocket size. It will fit, everything in that will fit right in your pocket. So that's going to be a fun thing, and we'll do it together. I'll have some some sort of like a little still life that we'll put right next to it so we can zoom right in and you can see me drawing them with the little ink pens, and then we'll do the watercolor right over it. So that will be a fun demo that you are welcome to play along with us. I encourage it. So thank you guys for putting up with an education in pigments and paint, and hopefully this will help you transcend your art to the next level. You guys take care, and we will see you next week. Thanks. I want to print